If you're unlucky enough not to live in Hurlford, Ayrshire, you won't know Effie. But everybody there knows that this is Effie, driving into the famous wee works of Andrew Strang and Company Limited, the Blair Foundry. And everybody in Hurlford knows that that is Stuart Fraser, the chairman of the company, son of the famous Alexander Fraser. This whole business is a sort of family affair. Well, here's the head of our family, the chairman. One word from him and his dogs do as they like. You'll notice, though, that eventually he gets his own way. Now, Mr. Fraser's hoping we'll enjoy the evening. Well, that's a certainty at a family party. There's one important member of the family that we won't have with us tonight. That is Mr. John C. Charlton, Managing Director of Andrew Strang's. He is keen-eyed, and he has invented several of the machines we use. That's Margaret Borland, our secretary, walking backwards because she's modest and doesn't want to get into the star photograph. This star photograph is taken to celebrate our jubilee. The great wee firm of Andrew Strang's was founded in 1897, but the Blair Foundry itself really dates from 1864. Right from the time it started, the Blair Foundry was a place where there was a family feeling, and you can see that that feeling is still being carried on today. A real handsome body of men, are they not? Oh yes, the girls were bound to get into the picture too. Do you remember what Robert Burns said about the bonny lasses of Ayrshire? Well, that's still true too. You wouldn't think that this foundry was once part of a farm, would you? I doubt if John Pearson, working that crane, thinks about the old Blair farm. Everybody in Hurlford is so used to the Blair Foundry nowadays. Well, we'll take a walk round the foundry, starting, of course, in the pattern shop. Whatever the Blair Foundry is going to cast, it's got to start here. That's Fergie Campbell planing some wood. And here's the boss, Will Black. How about lifting your head, Will, letting us see your good looks? No, he's too modest. Anyway, we mustn't disturb him measuring that blueprint. Ah, that's better. Johnny Findlay is quite ready to show us his profile. He's examining a pattern for an evaporator dome. This is one of the unusual jobs we turn out. And in case you're not an iron man, I'd better explain that that pattern is made of wood. At the Blair Foundry, we specialize in propellers, but we're ready to tackle anything. Now, this is a pattern for a scavenger pump cylinder for a Boxford engine. She's being lowered into a pit dug in the floor of the shop. Yes, this is a pretty tricky job. Probably take several weeks to finish her off. Vernon, on the right there, is in charge of the job. The bottom of this pit has been prepared with loam, and the sides will be filled in with sand after the pattern has been settled. We do almost any kind of casting here: generating plant for electricity stations, mining gear for the National Coal Board. You ask Margaret Borland. Or maybe you'd better not just at this moment. She seems to be a bit busy. Don't be surprised if you see Margaret again in this picture. She starts at early morning and she works till dewy eve, so she's bound to pop in somewhere. We'll tackle anything at Hurlford, big or little. Nicky here, Nicholas Higgins to you, is working on moulds for gratings. They're used for cores for various types of castings. Nicky, of course, is a mere youngster. He's only been with the firm since 1919. And Willie Gibson is mixing sand and oil, making mud pies. There's Alec Dean. And here's our famous Fizzer, fizzing away for all he's worth. In case you don't know Fizzer's real name, it's Johnny Morris, and he's a member of the famous Morris family who've already given 116 years in the service of the Blair Foundry. His brother Bob is foreman moulder. Now we come to the grand old man of the foundry, Old Jock, otherwise John Chapman. At the age of 71, he's our oldest employee. He's been working here ever since he was a boy, and his son and daughter-in-law both work in the foundry. He remembers the time when he helped to cast the horn to blow the trumpet for Mr. Alexander Fraser's election to Ayr County Council. As I've told you already, propellers are the main thing made by Strangs today. Now we're showing you the way the moulds are made for these propellers. It's a funny thing that this foundry has so much to do with the sea, and yet it's 9 miles away from it. All the same, the people of Hurlford have probably seen more propellers passing through the village than most of the inhabitants of ports like Glasgow or Greenock. Propellers are cast in loam, and there's no such thing as mass production. Every single propeller has to be made to rigid individual specifications. Thousands and thousands of Strangs propellers are being used today on ships sailing all the 7 seas, and a few other seas as well. Now here's Goldie, the moulder, assisted by Jimmy Wilson, building up a propeller mould. Goldie has been working on propellers for 6 years. He used to do sand moulding, but he likes this tricky job better. Jimmy, shoveling the sand there, is a 3rd-year apprentice, and Goldie says that Jimmy is the slickest boy at the job that he's ever had. Jimmy has still 2 years apprenticeship to go, but when Goldie served his time, it was the whole 7 years. Now we come back to the Morris family again. They're never very far away. Bob Morris, the foreman moulder, gets on with the job of building up the fires to bake the mould. An average time for these fires to be left in would be from Wednesday afternoon till Friday morning. You can't just bake a mould the way you bake shortbread. That is, if you can get any shortbread now. Mind you, although we're putting so much emphasis on propellers, don't forget that we make and have made all sorts of other things as well. One unusual war job was the making of the pile screws for the new quay at Cairn Ryan. And in the old days, we used to make everything from pit rails for pits to storage water tanks for distilleries. Ah me, these were the days. Strangs castings are helping to hold up a couple of newspaper offices in Glasgow, and there are columns and lintels still in use in buildings as far away as Calcutta. Meanwhile, the hood is being collected from the last job, and Dick, the crane man, is running backwards and forwards through the shop. I doubt if you'll notice any of the chaps here singing at their work, but that used to be a great feature of the old days in the Blair Foundry. The whole shop would start up a song, and their favourite was the great old covenanting psalm, "Now Israel may say, and that truly." After the baking process has taken place, we take a look into the inside of the mould. And these cave-like apertures are where the metal flows casting the blades. Now we are probably at the most spectacular part of the foundry's work, tapping the furnaces. When McCafferty taps a furnace, it makes people think of their latter end. He certainly is a sparky worker. First, at a tap, the small jobs are done first, such as grates and so on. It makes quite a delightful pattern, but we can't see who's doing this work since they're wearing their caps. Then the big job starts. The molten iron runs into the ladle, then is carried by the overhead crane and chain to the propeller mold. Well, there's nothing very new about this, but it's still the part of the operation that gets the biggest number of visitors and seems to surprise them most. It must be the sparks that do it. For one of these big propellers, a couple of ladles, a big one and a small one, are used. It takes about 2 hours to collect enough metal, and that means 14 tons of it in the case of the propeller that's being made now. You'll see a lot of happy family faces around here, Findlay and Morris directing operations. And there's Joe Jones scratching his head. Joe came here in 1902. He went off to America for a couple of years, but he came back to the Blair Foundry. Quite a number of the older hands tried their luck in other parts, but there's something about this foundry that always brings them back. Remember Will Black, the foreman in the pattern shop? Well, he retired a few years ago and he took up bird fancying. Not the kind of birds you're thinking of, I mean doos. But the trouble was that the war cut out bird seed, so Will Black gave up his birds and came back to work at the foundry. Here we are in the dressing shop with a couple of well-known iron dressers at work on a 2-foot propeller. That's Duffy on the left, and on the right is the namesake of the well-known film star, James Mason. You can tell him from the film star because our Mason is always known as Jimmy. Now, Davy Miller and Willie Jones are working a 14-ton propeller in the balancing machine. When it's properly balanced, the propeller should sit squarely. Even though these propellers are such big jobs, the operations are really about as finicky as cooking wartime sausages without making them burst. It's in the machine shop that you see several of the inventions of our manager, Mr. Charlton. As I said, they've made a very big difference to the production of the foundry. Willie Miller is the operator here, and you can see another Willie, McChristie, at work. I told you about Mr. Charlton's inventions. Well, this is a key slotter, and it's the only one in existence. Here we are, just about at the end of our tour. And I'd like to say again that the secret of the success of the wee Blair Foundry at Hurlford is that everybody works together in this family atmosphere. When these propellers leave Hurlford on their long way to the shipyards, and then their much longer way around the world, they carry with them the evidence that you won't find a better worker in the world than a good Scottish craftsman. No wonder old Will is putting up the firm's name on the lorry before it takes the propeller away. We are all proud of the name of Andrew Strang & Company Limited, and we are all absolutely sure that as long as people need the propellers and the other things we make, the happy family of Hurlford will supply them.